There wasn't a dramatic moment, no life-altering event, no grand heartbreak that forced growth, no sudden revelation that changed everything overnight. It was quieter than that. But something in me shifted, and I knew it because the way I looked at love stopped being reactive and started being intentional. I used to think growth came from pain, and sometimes it does. But this shift didn't come from pain. It came from awareness, from reflection, from watching patterns repeat around me and deciding I didn't want to live inside them. There was a time when I measured love by intensity, by how strong the emotions felt, by how quickly connection formed, by how deeply attraction pulled. But something in me shifted, and I stopped chasing intensity. I started valuing stability. Future wife, I don't know where you are right now. I don't know what season of life you're in, but I need you to know this. The version of me that will meet you is not the same version that once confused excitement for alignment. Something changed, and it changed quietly. I began noticing how chaos disguises itself as passion, how unpredictability can feel thrilling, but slowly erodes peace, how constant emotional highs and lows can trick you into believing something is deep when it's just unstable. And one day I realized, I don't want unstable depth. I want steady depth. That was the shift. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was clarity settling in. I stopped asking, how intense does this feel? And started asking, how peaceful does this feel? Peace became my metric. Peace in conversation. Peace in silence. Peace in disagreement. Peace in future planning. Peace when nothing extraordinary is happening, because ordinary moments reveal sustainability. Future wife. Something in me shifted when I stopped needing validation from attention. There was a time when being desired felt like confirmation, when attraction felt like accomplishment, when admiration felt like security. But I grew out of that. I stopped needing to feel chosen by many. I started wanting to choose one correctly. That shift matured me. It simplified me. It steadied me. I don't want options. I want alignment. Something else shifted too. I stopped being afraid of commitment and started being afraid of misalignment. Commitment itself isn't heavy. Commitment to the wrong person is. And that realization changed how I approach everything. I no longer rush potential. I don't accelerate intimacy to secure feelings. I don't ignore subtle red flags because chemistry is strong. I don't silence intuition for convenience, because something in me refuses to compromise peace now. Future wife, there was a moment, small and forgettable on the surface, where I realized I was no longer afraid of being alone. Not because I wanted to be alone, but because I trusted my timing. Loneliness used to make me impatient. Now it makes me reflective. It used to make me question my standards. Now it strengthens them. That's how I knew something shifted. When you stop lowering standards because you feel alone, you've grown. I stopped romanticizing potential. I started respecting patterns. I stopped hoping someone would grow into alignment. I started choosing only what already aligned. Growth can happen within marriage, but foundation must exist before it. And something in me finally understood that deeply. Future wife, I shifted from being reactive to being prepared. Prepared emotionally. Prepared mentally. Prepared mentally. Prepared mentally. Prepared spiritually. Prepared practically. Not perfect, but ready. Ready to choose once. Ready to build intentionally. Ready to stay consistent. There was a time when I feared losing freedom. Now I fear wasting time on what isn't aligned. Freedom isn't lost in healthy love. It's strengthened. It's refined. It's directed. That understanding changed everything. Something in me also shifted in how I see conflict. I used to view conflict as a threat. Now I see it as a test of maturity. The right person won't avoid hard conversations. She'll handle them with calm, with clarity, with respect. And I will too. I no longer fear disagreement. I fear emotional instability. That distinction matured me. Future wife, the biggest shift happened when I stopped asking, will this work? And started asking, is this right? Almost anything can work with enough effort, but not everything is meant to last. And lasting is what I want. I don't want something that survives. I want something that thrives. Something grounded, something resilient, something peaceful. That shift from surviving to thriving changed how I see you, even before I know you. I'm not looking for someone to complete me. I'm not looking for someone to fix loneliness. I'm not looking for someone to validate identity. I'm looking for alignment, shared direction, shared discipline, shared values, shared peace. Something in me also shifted in how I define strength. Strength used to mean independence. Now it means stability. Stability in emotion, stability in communication, stability in values, stability in commitment. Because unstable strength isn't strength, it's noise. Future wife, I no longer want a love that feels like adrenaline. I want a love that feels like adrenaline. I want a love that feels like assurance. I no longer want a connection that keeps me guessing. I want one that keeps me grounded. And that desire didn't come from disappointment. It came from maturity. I stopped being impressed by intensity. I started being impressed by consistency. Consistency in words. Consistency in actions. Consistency in character. Consistency reveals truth. Something in me shifted when I realized I don't want to be convinced into love. I want to be certain. Certainty isn't loud. It's steady. It doesn't argue with itself. It doesn't require persuasion. It just feels right. Future wife, I believe this shift happened because I finally understood the weight of forever. Forever isn't romantic when you think about it deeply. It's responsibility. It's discipline. It's leadership. It's sacrifice. It's partnership. And I don't approach that lightly anymore. I used to imagine love as something that happens. Now I see it as something you build, brick by brick, decision by decision, conversation by conversation. And building requires readiness. Something in me became ready, not desperate, not pressured, ready to choose without fear, ready to commit without hesitation, ready to love without escape routes. Future wife, when I finally meet you, you won't encounter a man chasing intensity. You'll meet a man who values peace. You won't meet someone afraid of vulnerability. You'll meet someone who sees vulnerability as strength. You won't meet someone unsure about commitment. You'll meet someone prepared for it. Because something in me shifted long before you arrived. And that shift was quiet. Quiet growth, quiet discipline, quiet maturity, but powerful. It changed my standards. It changed my priorities. It changed my patience. It changed my perspective. And when I recognize you, I won't recognize you by fireworks. I'll recognize you by steadiness, by how calm things feel, by how natural conversations flow, by how aligned our direction seems, by how peaceful commitment feels. Because something in me now understands that peace is the loudest confirmation. So wherever you are right now, know this. The man who will stand in front of you has already shifted. He no longer chases noise. He no longer fears depth. He no longer rushes clarity. He no longer compromises standards. He is steady, grounded, disciplined, prepared. And when he chooses you, it won't be because something dramatic happened. It will be because something quiet aligned, because something in him shifted. And that shift was toward you. When I told you something in me shifted, I meant it in the deepest sense. Not a personality change, not a reinvention, not a sudden emotional awakening. It was quieter, more structural, like a foundation being reinforced underneath a house that already existed. From the outside, nothing dramatic changed, but internally everything became clearer. There was a time when I pursued love with curiosity. Now I approach it with conviction. That's the shift. Curiosity is light. Conviction is weighty. Curiosity explores possibilities. Conviction recognizes alignment. I used to wonder, could this become something? Now I ask, is this already something solid? That subtle change redefined how I move. Future wife, something in me shifted when I stopped entertaining emotional ambiguity. There was a time when mixed signals felt exciting, uncertainty felt intriguing, the unknown felt magnetic, but I matured, and I realized uncertainty isn't romantic, it's draining. Ambiguity doesn't deepen love, it weakens trust, and trust is everything. So I stopped being impressed by unpredictability. I started being impressed by clarity, clarity in communication, clarity in intention, clarity in detention, clarity in direction, because clarity creates safety, and safety creates longevity. Something in me shifted when I realized I don't want to be someone's option, and I don't want options either. I want decision, mutual decision, clear choice, intentional commitment. I don't want to guess how someone feels. I don't want to decode behavior. I don't want to interpret silence. I want transparency, because transparency builds confidence, and confidence eliminates doubt. Future wife, I stopped romanticizing emotional highs. There was a time when I equated deep emotion with deep connection, but deep emotion without discipline burns fast. Real connection isn't loud, it's consistent. It doesn't spike dramatically, it sustains steadily. That shift in understanding reshaped my standards. I no longer chase sparks. I build fire that lasts. Something else shifted too. I stopped trying to impress. I stopped trying to prove. I stopped trying to prove. I stopped trying to perform. There was a time when I believed love required presentation. Show your best side. Highlight strengths. Minimize weaknesses. But that's unsustainable. And I want sustainability. So I became comfortable with authenticity. Comfortable being honest. Comfortable with being honest. Comfortable with being flaws. Comfortable expressing need. Because pretending is exhausting. And I don't want exhaustion in marriage. Future wife, something in me shifted when I realized peace is more valuable than passion. Passion can be created. Peace must be recognized. Passion can be temporary. Peace is foundational. Passion excites. Peace stabilizes. I want stability. I want foundation. I want something that feels calm even when nothing extraordinary is happening. Because ordinary days are most of life. Something in me shifted when I stopped fearing depth. Depth used to intimidate me. Long-term planning, shared finances, shared routines, shared responsibility. But now depth feels meaningful. It feels purposeful. It feels aligned with who I've become. I don't want surface connection anymore. I want layered understanding, shared direction, emotional maturity. I want to build something that survives storms, not something that dissolves at the first sign of discomfort. Future wife, I also shifted in how I see conflict. I used to think compatibility meant avoiding disagreement. Now I know compatibility means handling disagreement well. The right woman won't agree with me on everything, and I don't want her to. I want someone who challenges respectfully, communicates calmly, stands firm without disrespect, and receives correction without ego. That kind of maturity attracts me now, because I've matured too. Something in me shifted when I stopped fearing forever. Forever used to feel overwhelming, like a commitment too big to comprehend. But now forever feels directional. It feels like choosing a path and walking it confidently, not because I know everything, but because I trust alignment. If alignment exists, forever feels natural. If alignment is missing, forever feels heavy. I've learned to distinguish those feelings. Future wife, something in me shifted when I realized loneliness isn't an emergency. It's a season, a refining season, a strengthening season, a clarifying season. Loneliness no longer pressures me into compromise. It no longer makes me lower standards. It no longer tempts me toward convenience. It simply reminds me that alignment is worth waiting for. And waiting with clarity is powerful. I stopped fearing being alone, and that removed desperation. Desperation distorts judgment. Peace sharpens it. Something in me shifted when I stopped asking for potential and started requiring principle. Potential is exciting. Principle is stable. Potential promises growth. Principle guarantees foundation. I don't want to marry potential. I want to marry potential. Character, consistency, integrity, shared discipline, shared direction. That shift changed how I view you even before I know you. I'm not searching for perfection. I'm searching for peace. Not searching for peace. Not searching for flawlessness. Searching for alignment. Future wife, I shifted from thinking love should feel overwhelming to believing love should feel grounding. Overwhelming feelings are intoxicating. Grounding feelings are secure. And I choose security. Something in me shifted when I realized commitment isn't restrictive. It's liberating, because when you choose once with conviction, you stop looking around, you stop questioning alternatives, you stop analyzing possibilities, you focus, you build, you grow. That focus excites me now. I don't want endless options. I want one direction. Something else shifted too. I stopped fearing vulnerability as weakness. Now I see it as courage. Expressing need, admitting doubt, asking for reassurance, offering reassurance, sharing ambition, sharing insecurity. That's not weakness. That's partnership. And I'm ready for partnership. Future wife. Something in me shifted when I understood that marriage isn't about emotion alone. It's about discipline. Daily discipline. Choosing each other repeatedly. Communicating even when tired. Resolving conflict even when irritated. Supporting even when stretched. I'm not intimidated by that anymore, or prepared for it. Because I've practiced discipline alone. And discipline practice alone translates into discipline practice together. The shift didn't make me more romantic. It made me more romantic. But realistic doesn't mean pessimistic. It means intentional. Intentional love lasts. Accidental love fades. I don't want accidental. I want intentional. Future wife, when you meet me, you'll meet a man who has already processed fear, already confronted impatience, already refined his standards, already let go of almost, already chosen peace over pressure. And that's why the shift matters. Because I'm no longer chasing something undefined. I'm preparing for something aligned. Something in me shifted from hoping love works to ensuring alignment exists first. From chasing excitement to building stability. From fearing commitment to respecting it deeply. Now, when I finally recognize you, I won't recognize you by intensity. I'll recognize you by calm, by how steady everything feels, by how natural conversations flow, by how aligned our values are, by how peaceful commitment feels. Because something in me now understands. Peace is the loudest confirmation. So wherever you are right now, know this, the shift already happened. I'm not searching blindly anymore. I'm not hoping randomly. I'm not chasing noise. I'm grounded, clear, prepared. And when I choose you, it won't be because something dramatic occurred. It will be because something aligned quietly. Because something in me shifted. And that shift moved me closer to you. When I say something in me shifted, I don't mean I became softer or colder. I became steadier. There was a time when my heart moved faster than my discernment, when emotion arrived before evaluation, when connection felt like confirmation. I don't regret those seasons. They taught me awareness. But awareness without discipline still leads to confusion. The shift was discipline meeting desire. I didn't stop wanting love. I stopped wanting it prematurely. That difference changed everything. Future wife, I began to notice how often people rush towards something simply because it feels good in the moment. I saw how attraction can blur standards, how attention can inflate ego, how loneliness can disguise compromise as opportunity. And quietly, without announcement, something in me rejected that pattern. I stopped reacting to feelings. I started responding to alignment. There's power in that distinction. I used to measure potential by chemistry. Now I measure compatibility by character. I used to feel flattered by admiration. Now I look for shared values. I used to think intensity meant depth. Now I know consistency reveals depth. That shift didn't make me less romantic. It made me more intentional. Future wife, something changed in the way I evaluate peace. Before, peace felt like boredom. If something didn't feel electric, I questioned it. If conversations weren't dramatic, I wondered if something was missing. If things moved steadily instead of quickly, I doubted momentum. But I've learned something most people miss. Peace feels unfamiliar when you're used to chaos. So when I first began choosing calm over intensity, it felt strange, not wrong, just unfamiliar. And I had to teach myself that unfamiliar doesn't mean incorrect. Now, peace feels powerful. It feels secure. It feels like something that can last. Something else shifted too. The way I view time. I used to think love needed to happen quickly or it might slip away. That if you didn't accelerate things, someone else would step in. That if you didn't act fast, opportunity would vanish. But that mindset comes from scarcity, and scarcity breeds fear. I don't operate from scarcity anymore. If alignment exists, it won't require panic. If compatibility is real, it won't demand speed. If something is meant to be built, it will withstand patience. That realization slowed me down, but not in a lazy way, in a grounded way. Future wife, I stopped fearing missed chances and started fearing rushed decisions. Rushed commitment is heavier than delayed commitment. Rushed attachment is riskier than thoughtful connection. Rushed emotion can cloud long-term clarity, so I stopped rushing. And that shift created confidence. Confidence in my timing. Confidence in my discernment. Confidence in my discernment. I don't need to grasp at something just because it appears. I can observe, evaluate, reflect, and choose with intention. There was another shift that happened quietly. I stopped being impressed by performance. Performance is easy to maintain short-term. The character reveals itself long-term. I began watching patterns instead of promises. I began noticing how someone handles inconvenience, not just romance, how they respond under stress, how they speak when frustrated, how they treat people when there's nothing to gain. Because marriage isn't built on date nights, it's built on daily behavior, and daily behavior reveals truth. Future wife, something in me shifted when I realized I don't want a relationship that looks good. I want one that is good. There's a difference. Something can look stable from the outside, but feel unsettled internally. Something can look passionate, but lack foundation. Something can appear impressive, but feel fragile. I don't want fragile. I want durable. Durable conversation, durable trust, durable discipline, durable commitment. That's what the shift created in me. Durability. I'm no longer fascinated by surface compatibility. Shared hobbies are nice. Shared taste is pleasant. Shared humor is enjoyable. But shared principles are essential. Shared direction is critical. Shared discipline is necessary. Without those, everything else erodes. Future wife. The shift also changed how I handle silence. Silence used to create anxiety. If someone didn't respond quickly, I wondered. If conversations paused, I questioned. If energy shifted slightly, I analyzed. But maturity brought security. Security means I don't interpret every fluctuation as threat. Security means I trust rhythm, trust pacing, trust that steadiness doesn't require constant stimulation, and that security inside me is part of the shift. Something else changed too. I stopped trying to be chosen. I stopped subtly performing for approval. Stopped adjusting tone to impress. Stopped highlighting strengths while hiding flaws. I became comfortable being exactly who I am. Because if I have to be edited to be loved, that love won't last. Authenticity is risky with the wrong person, but necessary with the right one. And I'm ready to be authentic without fear. Future wife. The shift also altered how I view leadership. Leadership used to feel like pressure, like constant strength, like having to know every answer. But I've learned leadership in marriage is steadiness, not dominance. Consistency, not control. Humility, not ego. And I'm not intimidated by that anymore because I've learned to lead myself first. Discipline in private prepares you for responsibility in partnership. The shift wasn't loud. It was cumulative. Small realizations stacking over time, patterns observed, lessons internalized, mistakes processed, standards refined, and eventually clarity settled in. Future wife, I don't need fireworks anymore. I need foundation. I don't need adrenaline. I need assurance. I don't need adrenaline. I need assurance. I don't need chaos to feel alive. I need calm to feel aligned. The shift made me patient, but not passive. Intentional, but not rigid. Confident, but not arrogant. Ready, but not desperate. There's a balance that only maturity brings, and I reached it. I don't chase. I don't rush. I don't cling. I don't entertain confusion. I move steadily. And when I choose fully. That's the shift. Something in me also changed regarding fear of loss. Loss used to intimidate me. The thought of loving deeply and losing it. The thought of building something that could collapse. But now I understand something important. You cannot avoid loss by avoiding depth. You only avoid fulfillment. If it's aligned, depth is worth the risk. And maturity means loving courageously, not cautiously. Future wife, the shift prepared me for you. Not for fantasy. Not for unrealistic expectations, but for reality. Real conversations, real disagreements, real growth, real responsibility, real partnership. And I'm not intimidated by real anymore because I'm not chasing an idea of you. I'm preparing for the actual you. Flaws and strengths, ambitions and fears, confidence and vulnerability, and I bring the same. When I finally meet you, you won't meet someone uncertain about direction. You won't meet someone analyzing every move. You won't meet someone chasing intensity. You'll meet steadiness, clarity, intentionality, because something in me shifted long before we met. And that shift made me ready to recognize you, not by excitement, not by overwhelming emotion, but by peace. Peace that doesn't argue, peace that doesn't fluctuate wildly, peace that doesn't fluctuate wildly, peace that settles in my chest and says, build here. And when I feel that, I won't hesitate. Because the shift already happened, and it shifted me toward forever. There's something about growth that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with applause. It doesn't come with dramatic scenes. It comes quietly, through repetition, reflection, and realization. And one day you wake up and realize you no longer think the way you used to. That's what happened to me. Something in me shifted, not in a way that made me unrecognizable, but in a way that made me unwavering. I used to entertain possibilities. Now I evaluate alignment. I used to ask, what if this works? Now I ask, does this make sense long term? That shift changed my emotional posture. I stopped leaning forward out of curiosity. I started standing still out of clarity. Future wife, I began to recognize that a lot of people confuse availability with readiness. Just because someone is present doesn't mean they're prepared. Just because something is accessible doesn't mean it's aligned. I used to assume opportunity meant movement. Now I know opportunity means evaluation. I no longer rush toward what appears. I observe. I assess. I discern. Because discernment protects peace, and peace became my priority. Something in me shifted when I realized I don't need to be constantly stimulated to feel connected. I don't need constant messages, constant excitement, constant novelty. I need rhythm, healthy rhythm, space that feels secure, conversations that don't feel forced, silence that doesn't feel threatening. The shift made me comfortable in steadiness. Steadiness used to feel boring. Now it feels powerful. Future wife, I also shifted in how I view attraction. Attraction is easy. Alignment is rare. I used to confuse the two. I'd feel strong chemistry and assume compatibility would follow. But chemistry can exist without shared values. Attraction can exist without shared direction. And without direction, things eventually drift. I don't want drift. I want direction. Shared direction. That shift matured my expectations. I don't look for sparks anymore. I look for substance. Something else changed too. I stopped being emotionally reactive. I used to respond quickly to emotion. If I felt connected, I leaned in immediately. If I felt doubt, I pulled back immediately. Now I sit with both. I allow clarity to surface before acting. That patience protects me from impulse, and it will protect us from unnecessary turbulence. Future wife, the shift also changed how I see vulnerability. Before, vulnerability felt risky because I hadn't fully built internal stability. Now, vulnerability feels like strength. Not because I trust everyone, but because I trust myself. I trust my discernment. I trust my pace. I trust my boundaries. And trusting yourself removes insecurity. Insecurity is where fear lives, but fear no longer directs me. Something in me shifted when I stopped seeking someone to add excitement to my life. I started seeking someone to build structure with. Excitement fades. Structure sustains. Structure in communication. Structure in responsibility. Structure in shared goals. Structure and shared goals. And discipline is attractive to me now in a way it wasn't before. Future wife, I shifted from romanticizing the beginning to respecting the middle. The beginning of relationships is easy. You're curious. You're energized. You're attentive. But the middle, when routine sets in, when responsibility grows, when life becomes ordinary, that's where true compatibility reveals itself. And I'm no longer afraid of the ordinary. In fact, I'm preparing for it, because ordinary days make up most of forever. Something in me also shifted in how I handle loneliness. Loneliness used to push me toward connection. Now it pushes me toward growth. Instead of filling space quickly, I refine myself. Instead of lowering standards, I strengthen them. Instead of fearing being alone, I use the time wisely. Loneliness no longer feels like lack. It feels like preparation. And preparation builds confidence. Confidence builds clarity. Clarity builds peace. Future wife, I also stopped being impressed by charm. Charm is temporary. Consistency is enduring. I watch how someone shows up repeatedly, not just how they show up when things are exciting. Consistency in tone, consistency in hone, consistency in effort, consistency in character. That's what I value now, because consistency builds trust. Trust builds safety. Safety builds marriage. Something in me shifted when I realized love doesn't need to feel overwhelming to be real. Overwhelming often means unstable. Grounded means durable. If something constantly feels dramatic, it probably lacks foundation. And I no longer chase drama. I choose depth. I choose calm. I choose steady progression. Future wife, I also shifted in how I see timing. Before I felt pressure to move quickly if something seemed promising. Now I believe timing reveals truth. If something can't survive patience, it won't survive permanence. So I'm not afraid of taking time. Time exposes patterns. Time clarifies character. Time confirms alignment. And I respect time now. The shift also changed how I view leadership in marriage. Leadership isn't about control. It's about stability. It's about being emotionally grounded when things feel uncertain. It's about protecting peace. It's about taking responsibility without resentment. And I'm not intimidated by that role anymore. Because I've practiced stability alone. I've learned to regulate emotion, to think before reacting, to communicate instead of withdrawing, to stay calm under pressure. That preparation matters. Future wife, something in me shifted from wanting to be understood to wanting to understand. There's a difference. Wanting to be understood can sometimes come from ego. Wanting to understand comes from humility. I want to understand your fears, your history, your habits, your ambitions, not to fix you, but to support you. And that humility came from growth. Something else shifted. I stopped fearing permanence. I used to see forever as overwhelming. Now I see it as directional. If alignment is present, forever feels purposeful. If alignment is absent, forever feels heavy. I trust myself to recognize that difference. Future wife, when I finally meet you, you won't meet someone chasing novelty. You'll meet someone building foundation. You won't meet someone unsure about direction. You'll meet someone grounded in it. You won't meet someone easily shaken by emotional waves. You'll meet someone steady enough to navigate them. Because something in me shifted long before you arrived. And that shift wasn't emotional, it was structural. It made me decisive. It made me disciplined. It made me patient. It made me intentional. And when I recognize you, I won't recognize you by intensity. I'll recognize you by intensity. I'll recognize you by alignment. By how natural responsibility feels with you. By how calm our conversations remain even when topics get serious. By how clear our direction feels. By how peaceful commitment sounds. because peace is now my compass, and something in me shifted permanently toward it. So wherever you are, know this. The man you will meet has already done the internal work. He's already faced confusion, already processed impatience, already refined standards, already chosen clarity over chaos. And when he stands in front of you, he won't hesitate because of uncertainty. He'll move forward because of conviction, because something in him shifted, and that shift made him ready to build with you. By now, if you followed my heart through these words, you know this wasn't a sudden transformation. It wasn't a dramatic collapse followed by reinvention. It was gradual, layer by layer, decision by decision. A refining, not a rebellion. Something in me shifted, and it didn't make me faster. It made me firmer. There was a time when I approached relationships with a sense of curiosity mixed with urgency. If something felt promising, I leaned in quickly. If something felt uncertain, I tried to fix it quickly. I wanted movement, momentum, proof. But momentum without maturity is unstable. And I learned that the hard way, not through disaster, but through awareness. Future wife, something changed when I realized I don't need to force direction. The right direction reveals itself naturally when both people are aligned. I stopped trying to make things work. I started asking if they fit. Fit in values. Fit in discipline. Fit in long-term vision. Fit in emotional rhythm. That shift removed unnecessary pressure. Because when something fits, it doesn't require constant adjustment. It settles. And that settling doesn't mean boredom. It means compatibility. I used to think love required constant intensity to survive. That if things weren't electrifying, something must be missing. But now I understand that what survives isn't intensity. It's stability. It's routine without resentment. It's responsibility without resistance. It's communication without manipulation. And something in me shifted toward valuing those things deeply. Future wife, I stopped being impressed by how someone makes me feel in a moment. I started observing how someone makes me feel over time. Do I feel calm around them? Do I feel respected consistently? Do I feel understood without performance? Do I feel supported without dependency? Time reveals truth, and I trust time now. The shift made me patient, but not passive. Intentional, but not rigid. I no longer react to attraction alone. I evaluate character. I no longer assume good chemistry equals good future. I assess alignment. Because forever deserves assessment. Something else shifted too. I stopped fearing the possibility of loving deeply. There was a time when depth felt risky, because depth means exposure. It means letting someone see your ambition, your insecurities, your flaws, your intensity. But now depth excites me, not in a dramatic way, in a grounded way. Depth builds trust. Trust builds safety. Safety builds marriage. Future wife, something in me shifted when I realized that peace isn't boring. Peace is powerful. Peace doesn't scream. It whispers. It doesn't rush. It guides. And I want to be guided by peace, not adrenaline. I don't need butterflies to confirm something. I need steadiness. Steadiness in tone. Steadiness in values. Steadiness in commitment. The shift also changed how I view compromise. Before, compromise felt like losing ground. Now I understand that healthy compromise is collaboration. It's not surrendering identity. It's aligning direction. But I also know there's a line between compromise and self-betrayal. And the shift taught me where that line is. I will compromise on preferences, but not on principles. I will adjust on style, but not on standards. Because if you sacrifice principle for peace, you lose both. Future wife. I stopped being afraid of saying no. Saying no used to feel like missing out. Now it feels like protection. Every no to misalignment is a yes to clarity. Every no to confusion is a yes to stability. Every no to temporary comfort is a yes to long-term peace. And peace matters more to me than comfort ever will. Something in me shifted when I stopped looking for someone to fill space in my life. I started looking for someone to build structure with. Space can be filled by anyone. Structure can only be built with the right person. Structure requires shared discipline, shared goals, shared endurance, and I'm ready for structure. Future wife, I also shifted in how I see leadership. Leadership isn't about dominance, it's about consistency, about being stable when emotions fluctuate, about being clear when circumstances get complicated, about being reliable when pressure increases, and I've been practicing that stability within myself, because I don't want to bring chaos into your life. I want to bring calm. Something else changed. I stopped being impressed by words alone. Words are easy. Consistency is difficult. Promises are simple. Patterns are revealing. I watch patterns now, how someone responds when tired, how someone communicates when frustrated, how someone handles disagreement. Because marriage isn't built on highlight moments, it's built on ordinary behavior. Future wife, something in me shifted when I stopped needing love to feel urgent. Urgency often comes from fear. Fear of losing someone. Fear of being alone. Fear of missing out. But I don't operate from fear anymore. I operate from alignment. If alignment exists, there's no need to rush. If alignment doesn't exist, there's no need to force. That clarity simplified everything. The shift also changed how I view time. I don't see waiting as delay. I see it as refinement. Waiting sharpens standards. Waiting strengthens discipline. Waiting clarifies vision. And I'm not intimidated by waiting anymore, because I'm not empty. I'm building. Future wife, when I finally meet you, you won't meet someone chasing novelty. You'll meet someone rooted in intention. You won't meet someone easily distracted. You'll meet someone focused. You won't meet someone uncertain about direction. You'll meet someone prepared to define it. Because something in me shifted before you arrived. And that shift made me steady. It made me confident in what I want, confident in what I won't accept, confident in my pace, confident in my discernment. I no longer romanticize chaos. I no longer entertain confusion. I no longer mistake intensity for compatibility. I no longer fear depth. I no longer rush clarity. The shift didn't make me colder. It made me calmer. It didn't remove emotion. It refined it. It refined it. It stabilized it. And when I recognize you, I won't recognize you by excitement alone. I'll recognize you by alignment, by how naturally responsibility feels shared, by how peacefully conversation flows, by how clearly our direction aligns, by how steady commitment feels. Because peace is now my compass, and something in me permanently turned toward it. So wherever you are right now, know this. The man who will choose you has already shifted. He's already done the internal work, already processed impatience, already refined standards, already walked away from almost, already chosen stability over chaos. And when he stands in front of you, he won't hesitate out of fear. He'll move forward out of conviction, because something in him shifted, and that shift rooted him in love that lasts. If this is the final part of what I need to say about this shift, then I want to speak plainly, not poetically, not dramatically, plainly. Something in me shifted, and it changed the way I stand. Not the way I feel, the way I stand. There's a difference. Feelings move, they rise and fall, they intensify and cool. But posture remains, and my posture toward love changed. I used to lean forward, now I stand grounded. I used to rush momentum, now I respect direction. I used to chase sparks, now I build foundation. That shift didn't happen overnight, it happened through observation, through watching relationships that look strong on the surface but lacked alignment underneath, through seeing how intensity fades when discipline is absent, through noticing how confusion creeps in when clarity isn't established early. And I made a quiet decision. I don't want confusion in my forever. Future wife. Something in me stopped being impressed by potential. Potential is everywhere. Character is rare. Anyone can promise growth. Few people demonstrate consistency. And I no longer measure worth by what someone might become. I am measured by who they already are. Because marriage is not a renovation project. It's a partnership between two already formed foundations. Growth will happen. But foundation must exist first. That realization shifted my standards. Not upward in arrogance, but inward in clarity. I no longer entertain emotional ambiguity. If communication feels unclear, I address it. If values feel misaligned, I step back. If direction feels uncertain, I pause, because I refuse to build on unstable ground. And that's not fear. That's maturity. Something else shifted too. I stopped confusing attraction with readiness. Attraction is easy. Readiness is built. Attraction can happen instantly. Readiness takes time. I've taken the time to refine myself, to strengthen discipline, to regulate emotion, to confront insecurity, to confront ego, to confront impatience. The shift wasn't about finding you. It was about becoming prepared for you. Future wife, I don't want to meet you halfway healed, halfway certain, halfway disciplined. I want to meet you whole, not flawless, but whole, whole in conviction, whole in values, whole in direction. Something in me shifted when I realized love doesn't need to be chaotic to be meaningful. It doesn't need drama to feel deep. It doesn't need instability to feel alive. The deepest love is often the calmest. The most durable connection is often the most steady. And I'm no longer intimidated by steady. I'm drawn to it. Future wife, I also shifted in how I view patience. Patience used to feel like waiting for something to happen. Now it feels like preparing for something significant. Patience isn't passive. It's intentional. It's choosing not to rush something sacred. It's refusing to force what isn't aligned. It's allowing clarity to surface before committing. And I respect patience now. Something in me shifted when I stopped seeking reassurance externally. I used to look for signs, signals, validation. Now I look inward for alignment. If my peace feels disturbed, I pause. If clarity feels strong, I move. Peace became my compass. Not emotion, not pressure, not comparison. Peace, because peace doesn't lie. Future wife, the shift also changed how I see responsibility. I no longer view responsibility as burden. I see it as privilege. To lead with integrity. To protect with consistency. To provide with stability. To love with discipline. That doesn't intimidate me anymore. It motivates me because I've been building toward it. Something else shifted too. I stopped fearing permanence. Permanence used to feel heavy because uncertainty existed. Now permanence feels purposeful because clarity exists. If alignment is present, forever feels natural. If alignment is absent, forever feels suffocating. I trust myself to recognize the difference. Future wife, I stopped being impressed by intensity alone. Intensity is loud. Consistency is quiet, and I've learned to value quiet strength. Strength in showing up repeatedly, strength in handling conflict calmly, strength in communicating honestly, strength in staying when things are ordinary. Ordinary days matter, because marriage is mostly ordinary days, and I'm not chasing highlight moments. I'm building sustainable life. The shift also changed how I handle fear. I don't ignore it. I evaluate it. Sometimes fear protects you from misalignment. Sometimes fear signals growth, but fear no longer controls me. Discernment does. And discernment was earned through experience. Future wife, when I meet you, you won't encounter someone chasing intensity. You'll encounter someone anchored in clarity. You won't meet someone unsure about direction. You'll meet someone who has already chosen discipline. You won't meet someone reacting emotionally. You'll meet someone responding intentionally because the shift happened long before you arrived. It made me less reactive, less impulsive, less distracted, and more grounded, more patient, more selective, more prepared. Something in me also shifted in how I see vulnerability. It's not weakness, it's courage. Courage to speak honestly, courage to admit uncertainty, courage to admit uncertainty, courage to apologize, courage to forgive, courage to stay open. And I'm not afraid of that anymore. Future wife, the shift made me ready for partnership, not fantasy. Partnership requires work. Work requires discipline. Discipline requires maturity. And maturity requires reflection. I've reflected. I've evaluated my patterns, my triggers, my strengths, my blind spots. Not to become perfect, but to become prepared. Because preparation protects peace, and peace protects marriage. When I recognize you, I won't recognize you by adrenaline. I won't recognize you by drama. I won't recognize you by overwhelming emotion. I'll recognize you by calm, by how natural responsibility feels shared, by how steady our conversations remain under pressure, by how clear our direction aligns, by how peaceful commitment sounds. Peace will confirm where emotion once tried to rush. Future wife, something in me shifted from hoping love works to ensuring alignment exists first. From chasing sparks to building foundation. From fearing commitment to respecting it deeply. From reacting emotionally to moving intentionally. And that shift made me ready to choose without hesitation, ready to commit without doubt, ready to build without fear, ready to stay without reservation. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for alignment. I'm not looking for intensity. I'm looking for steadiness. I'm not looking for noise. I'm looking for peace. And when I find you, it won't feel overwhelming. It will feel right. Right in a quiet way. Right in a grounded way. Right in a way that doesn't argue with itself. Because something in me already shifted toward forever. And when forever stands in front of me, in you, I'll recognize it. Not by fireworks, but by foundation. And I will step forward. Not rushed, not hesitant, not uncertain, prepared, because the shift didn't make me perfect. It made me ready to build with you. And ready is what forever requires.
I stop identifying someone who hesitates when depth appears. I become someone who evaluates honestly and commits intentionally. That identity shift feels empowering because identity shapes behavior and behavior shapes outcome. The fear of changing everything now feels almost ironic because everything needed to change my hesitation, my guardedness, my habit to protecting ego over connection. And once those change, everything strengthened, not externally at first, internally. And internal shifts create lasting external stability. I no longer feel the need to test alignment. I feel the responsibility to maintain it. And maintenance requires attention, not anxiety, attention. The difference matters. Anxiety questions constantly. Attention nurtures consistently. And nurturing is how something lasting grows. When I look at her, I